Regina McMichael, who's come all the way from South Carolina. Regina is the president of the Learning Factory, Inc. Regina is also known as the Safety Training Ninja. She might explain that later. And she also is the founder of Peace, Love, and Safety.
Good afternoon. So I'm going to just talk very briefly on a successful global training program that I was involved with. And I'm excited to say that the previous speakers and the questions that we're talking about actually kind of feed into this directly, so that works out quite beautifully. But to give you a case context of the idea that what we're presenting here today works everywhere in the world. And yes, there might be some minor adjustments to it, but it works throughout the world. And I say that because I delivered it throughout the world. So I was working with a nonprofit organization in over 80 countries. They operate in 80 countries with 6,000 employees. We did teach only in English, but that's in part because that was a requirement for anyone within their organization. So it was easy to utilize someone with that. I will also mention that this was a behavioral-based safety program for management, and it was part of a bigger cultural change within the organization, but I consider that good planning on the part of the client, that they put those things together so that they helped each other's training programs work. It's a very risk-diverse organization. The managers had been there for over 30 years. So the training had to be designed and delivered to overcome some of that historical, but we've always done it that way attitude. Does anybody experience that attitude when they're training? We've always done it this way, we're not going to change. So by the way, that was an example of adult learning there that Caroline was talking about. They were also reworking their entire safety program at the same time. So there was a huge load of change on all of the managers across the board as we went to push this major initiative. And what we focused on primarily for safety in general and then safety training in specific was simplicity. Make sure we're teaching them exactly what they need to know and only what they need to know for the application involved. And so we wanted to remove anything extra that would distract them from the most important message we were trying to achieve. We delivered the training in 25 countries. We had over 600 learners. And we did actually teach the CEO. He sat tight for 8 hours. Came last class, took it to the very last class, but we got him in there. And the idea was not only did the CEO and everyone in the C-suite attend the training, but members of the board of directors also attended because they made a commitment. And when you talk about success in programs, it's got to come from that level. Now, what I really appreciated about this organization was they decided they weren't going to have the C-suite taught separately. They said, that's not what's going to work. That's not how we connect with our workforce. So they made sure that members of the C-suite, of the executive level and the senior vice presidents, actually went through training with some of the lowest levels of managers and medium and high levels. They also made sure that they invited people that were part of the solution to safety challenges, not just direct supervisors. So we had vice presidents of finance. We had people who did architectural design who realized that they were a part of the solution 25 years before the hazard was actually created. So they actually took an approach that said we are going to look at it in a completely different way, holistically, so that everyone can be involved with the organization. Phase 2 of the training, once all the management level was trained, we were going to push it down to all of the employees, most of which were remote around the world. So that was a whole nother level of challenge that we'll be working on in the future. What I want to hit on very quickly in terms of how you achieve success is I used some classic instructional system design techniques. So ISD, Instructional Systems Design, is what the learning world uses, and a lot of safety people are starting to use that, but it is not as prevalent. So these are new terms for a lot of the folks in our industry around the world. So adult learning theory, which is exactly what Caroline just talked about, and then instructional design, where you follow a process. Now, safety and health people love process, so this should make a lot of sense to a lot of us. But following a system that's called ADDIE, it was developed in the 70s. It's utilized worldwide, not unique to the United States. And it's a process of designing and developing the training consistently every time so that you can achieve what your ultimate learning and business goals are. We did utilize one professional facilitator for the training so that it was consistent throughout the world, and that was me. and there was the advantage of a single language within the organization despite training worldwide. But one of the desires was that we had consistent training and the message was the same every single time. So they were willing to invest in having someone go to every location around the world. I didn't go to all 80 locations. We probably adjusted the training program probably about 10 to 15% for cultural differences. That is all. The core material did not change when we went from one culture to another. But one of the things that guaranteed our successes was the management commitment from above, but also the local and regional commitments from our organization. And that is, they made sure that everybody knew about the training, they got all the advanced information, they got excited about it, they wanted to be there, they got information in advance so that it wasn't a punishment. And as a result, people came in with open minds. And even in cultures where there isn't a lot of typical participation in training, where they're used to more lecture than activity, even in those locations around the world, specifically in Asia, we had amazing participation, and they were very excited to have the opportunity to learn with adult learning principles instead of having an 8-hour lecture about regulatory compliance, which is pretty unexciting for most folks. So we actually kind of twisted it and really took advantage of a lot of the things that we've already talked about. And what we saw was great participation. And I was a facilitator, not a trainer. And we utilized techniques where they told us what the answers were instead of me telling them how they should behave. And if someone tells you what they think things are and they come up with their own solutions, that's going to stick. And that training will make sense and it will be long lasting. But if I just lecture, unfortunately, like I'm doing right now, it makes it very difficult to stay in someone's mind. So the more the audience participates in the process, in the training, the more likely, oh, and I got a blank screen, the more likely they're going to get there. So if you are doing global training, identify cultural differences, but make sure that you have your core base and make sure you understand what the business is. And I apologize. I've never spoken less than 7 minutes in my life.
Talk to us about, your training sounds fun. Maybe it's a way of answering the question that you asked about how do you get people there. Well, once they're there, make sure it's fun. But can you just talk to us about the peace, love, and safety, please?
Well, to give you a little bit of a background, I entered the safety industry after my husband was killed on the job. And so I come in with a different perspective. And I started off in my early part of my career doing compliance work. But I found out for me, that's not what worked. That I needed to connect with people, and training was the way that I could do that. And how I was successful at it was putting my soul into it and my passion into it. So when I teach, I break a lot of rules about how you're supposed to behave and how a class is supposed to, how it's supposed to be, to the degree that I give out lots of prizes and candy and sweeties and rubber ducks and whatever else might work. And I can show you pictures of people from all over the world holding those ducks, happily receiving them. You have to connect with people and you have to figure out what's right for you, right for your team, right for your culture, because they didn't work everywhere, but they worked in a lot of places. So you've got to connect and you've got to figure out how that works. And I actually learned that process from a friend of mine who had construction workers fighting for little pink teddy bears. So if they're going to do that, then I think ducks will probably be okay. But yeah, we've got to connect to the soul of the people that we're trying to help.
Millennials, how do you teach millennials?
So how do you inspire and teach millennials?
You give them what they want.
Which is?
Because going back to the concept of adult learning is you respect what their needs are, and the fact that they learn differently through computers and through micro-learning, which we spoke of just for a moment. The idea is that that's how they learn, and if we want them to learn, we have to adjust ourselves as facilitators to match their needs. And if that means that what they get is a little bit different than perhaps someone who's north of 50 years old, then maybe that's what we have to do, because our end goal is making sure that that knowledge transfers and the behavior is what we want it to be. So you're going to have to adjust so that if and you're lucky if the bulk of your workforce is that age, that's actually pretty easy compared to some areas. So you have to learn how to develop training that matches those concepts, but they're also, that generation is much more self-learning. So a lot of them, you're like, okay, here's the concept, come back tomorrow and let's talk about it. And they'll go find out, they'll go look on Wikipedia, they'll go find their answer. So it's actually can be easier. We just have to let go of our previous ideas about what training is. Training can be lots of things.
Can you give us an example? Actually, no, you go first.
Okay.
Can you give us an example of something in your training that you've adapted for millennials, given their lack of attention span, etc.?
I've done like video micro-learning. So instead of bringing them in and having 8 hours of, let's say, forklift training, instead you would break it down to lots of little tiny pieces of training that they can go and access at their leisure. In many cases, they'll watch it at night, not even when they're at work. They're okay to do it on their own time. So you turn it into little pieces, interactive. They've grown up on video games. So shoot a video. You can shoot it with your phone. The quality of our phones are so good now. You can make excellent video, edit it right there, get a millennial to help you if you don't know how. That's what I do. And so you have that 5-minute chunk, that 3-minute chunk that registers with how their brain learns, and then they get that respect from you saying, thank you for training me in a way that makes sense to me.
What is the preferred media for the classic OSH training?
The medium.
Mm-hmm.
The way to give the course.
Like
is
PowerPoint, video?
I think traditionally what I'm still seeing worldwide is it's still face-to-face through a PowerPoint presentation. I don't support that as the best solution, but that is what I'm still seeing. So what we should do and what we are doing are not necessarily the same thing. And that's, I think, exactly what we're all trying to say here now, is that we need to have a shift in what we're doing. But the idea of having one group teach another group within the classroom and you stop speaking but facilitate the relationship between the two, that's where we need to be going in the organization going forward, so that the learning is more valuable, because otherwise people just fall asleep.
I would be happy if you would share some real case examples of how the measurement is carried out.
Okay.
So it can vary quite a bit, but what I try to recommend is to actually give job aids to the supervisors and make them as simple and as effective as possible. Don't overdo it, and then have them actually go out and make observations, but not turn them into, oh, I've come out to see if you're behaving safely. Are you going to do this right? Instead, try to make it a relationship moment where you're saying, I just want to confirm that we've done everything we need to. And it sounds like you're doing that type of thing as well. But I think organizationally, you want to start small and simple so that people don't feel like they're getting graded and then they get defensive. But make a tool for the supervisor, because the safety person isn't going to be able to do it. There's probably too many people. So you make the tool for the supervisor so that they can go out, do that confirmation, and then make it easy for them to give you that information back. That's the key. If it becomes a challenge to evaluate the behavior change, no one's going to do it.
How can we actually apply adult learning principles, which we know work, into a learning environment that is forced upon people?
Yeah, good question. So they're there under duress. They're not there voluntarily, a lot of them. So how do we overcome that? Anybody, point of view on the panel? Okay, can you pass to Regina, actually?
Thank you.
Because I've seen her presentation, so I know she addresses some of this.
So what I think, to kind of answer your question, is that it's got to start from the very top of management, that we have to actually start to treat safety training as not punishment. And that, unfortunately, is, in my experience, what I've seen worldwide, is that typically when people show up in the classroom that morning, they're like, what did I do wrong to have to go here? And so what we need to do is turn it around into, how did I get so lucky that I got to be in safety training class today? And so I think that has to start from the very top. We've got to start presenting ourselves, the materials, and the trainers, to present ourselves in a manner that make it desirable for people to come, which means we need to up the professionalism and the training capabilities, as we've talked about. We need to understand more how adults learn. But then I also think, quite honestly, I consult with my clients that they need to advertise and promote the safety training as something desirable, and so that people can see what's going to happen and that it's not a punishment to be there, that they're actually lucky. So I think that's a big change that we need to shift overall in our industry.
Regina, any other comments about millennials? God bless them.
Well, and it's not my specialty, but I really think the reality is that if we go back to the idea of adult learning, and whether you want to say a 21-year-old is an adult or not is another discussion, but the idea is that we have to connect with them on what works for them, so that they feel respected, that they don't feel that they're being blamed for something, so that follow-up test or idea doesn't come across with a negative perception. So I think reasonably we've got to build things to allow people to succeed in the way that's right for them. And I do want to comment that, you know, we can have a little fun and make jokes about particular groups, but the idea that all millennials are all one thing is not correct. The qualities exist and not everybody learns, and so just kind of want to dispel any, you know, boxes that we're putting.
Stereotypes.
Yeah, I don't want to do that. But the idea is that we do need to be ready organizationally to offer the training in different facets so that we connect with all of our learners, just like we would need to with cultural differences, with knowledge differences, with ability to read and write. We have to adapt all of those. So the age issue is no different in terms of adaptation.
Can we have a round of applause, please, for our panel?